Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, which is one in the series of virtual events that the Center on Global Energy Policy here at Columbia University has been hosting as a part of the 7th Annual Columbia Global Energy Summit. My name is Dr. Melissa Lott, and I'm the Director of Research and a Senior Research Scholar at the Center on Global Energy Policy at Columbia University School of Public and International Affairs. Let me quickly go through a few housekeeping items. I will say that this event is being webcast live, and the full video will be made available online later today, thanks to the hard work of our events team and communications team here at CGEP. I just wanted to say a quick thank you to Caitlin, Nicolina, Q, Jenna, and all the other people working behind the scenes here at the center to make this summit such a success, the success that it's been. For those of you who are joining us on Zoom, you can submit a question to us at any time by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Again, you can start doing that at any time during the program, and we'll be bringing those questions in towards the latter portion of this program today. In this session, we're going to be discussing the role of technology in finance, in climate change and clean energy innovation. And for this conversation, I'm really thrilled to be joined today by Dr. Carmichael Roberts, who's a founding partner with Material Impact, which is a fund that seeks out transformative technologies and works to build them into enduring companies that solve real-world problems. Carmichael is also the business lead of the investment committee at Breakthrough Energy Ventures, and he serves as a co-founder, board member, and director for just a huge number of technology companies. He's often cited for bringing a deeply collaborative approach to bringing technologies from university lab benches into society to help solve some of the most pressing needs facing our communities today. His career is really fantastic, and I encourage all of you to read about it in more detail online. It's spanned the gamut from basic research to entrepreneurship to venture capital. And I'll say that he understands from his own direct experience what it really takes to accelerate innovation and get funding in place to move technologies forward. This is one of the many reasons why I'm looking forward to today's conversation. So Carmichael, thank you again for joining us for the Columbia Global Energy Summit. Really great to have you here. And please allow me to pass the virtual microphone to you for some opening remarks just about this topic that we're talking about around financing and innovation and how we get technologies into the system.
Thank you so much, Melissa. I mean, this is a pleasure. And for those who don't know, Melissa in her own right is amazing on stage for as a person to do a virtual fireside with. And thanks just overall to Columbia and the Columbia Global Energy Summit to inviting me for today. So this topic is actually near and dear to my heart, this idea about how do you finance, the things that really, when you think about it, address some of the most important problems that we need to solve for mankind. And I would say, just going back to my background, like you mentioned, Melissa, part of my background in the first half of my career was as an entrepreneur raising money. And the second half of my career now is more as a person who helps deploy money, but also help entrepreneurs build companies that make a difference. And when I look back at my career, and people often ask me, as an entrepreneur, what are some of the lessons learned and that you've learned from now being on the other side of the fence, right? I'm giving money. What are some of the things that you would change and do differently from what you know now? And I would tell you this financing strategy around how you build a company is a really a big deal, particularly in the spaces where you're trying to solve some of the world's biggest problems. You need to try to recruit all the resources you can from the smartest sources possible. And that comes from the government, that comes from the private sector, comes from large companies, comes from individuals who've had experience around it. Financing is just a phenomenal opportunity to aggregate the resources that you need to build a company. And so I look at Breakthrough Energy Ventures for a second. What an unusual platform, right, to help people solve climate change. We think about energy, and I'd say from that standpoint, there are 25 or so business men and business women who've come together, put money in, but more importantly, have opened up their resources, connections, from all around the world to help these companies be successful. And that's what's really needed to solve difficult problems. The last piece I'll do, and then I'll hand it back over to you, Melissa, we can do some interaction, make sure I'm covering the most important things here, is collaboration is key. So you probably say, how does that, maybe some of the listeners will say, oh, how does that have to do with financing? Pivotal, because when you think about it, when you're recruiting collaborators, you should also be thinking about who's putting money into these ventures. and letting in, people who want to be helpful as compared to keeping them out, and fostering an ecosystem in topics like global energy, where that ecosystem feels like it can participate without exception, that everybody has something to bring. So I'm looking forward to, having more dialogue with you and making sure we cover some of the most important things. But this financing component is a big deal.
Yeah, no, and I know you and I have talked about that, just that key component of bringing everyone in who wants to help in the solution. How do we keep people involved, and how do we build the ecosystems we need? But I'll get there in just a minute. I wanted to start just at a high level talking through, you've been an entrepreneur, you've worked in medical devices, you've worked in clean water production or clean water, drinking water, produce renewable sources. I'm wondering what drew you to the climate and clean tech space when it comes to energy, climate, clean tech. And when you look at the space, could you comment on how you've seen things change maybe in the past few years or decade? And also what hasn't changed? What is still the same as the first time you were kind of discovering it?
Yeah. So I think this is probably true for I bet like 90% of all people. When you start to ask yourself, when you think about the difference between a job and a career, if you have choices, I mean, you always want to try to pick something that you're excited and to do and proud to do and work with people you want to work with. If all things being equal, you want to pick something that you wake up in the morning and you're thinking about yourself. Like, most days, like I'm excited to kind of go after what I'm going after.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to call and talk to, like, for today. I can't wait to talk with Melissa about these problems, right? And you get excited about the topic. So, why climate? For me, it represents, and I'm sure for many people, it represents one of these things where if you make a big difference, it makes a huge difference in mankind. And so for me, that's always been an important component to what I want to pursue, what I want to spend my time on. I don't see anything, quite honestly, when we think about broad reaching, every nook and cranny, across all economic strata, every ethnicity, gender, religion. I mean, climate is impacting everyone. So for me, that topic was really interesting and important. The other thing is climate allows you to cross over different areas. So I'm also a generalist. I love working on agriculture, like you said, food or water, materials like, steel, cement. We start talking about electrification and think about, whether it's the grid or whether it's transportation and the air I mean, what a wonderful set of topics that you can work on. So it's like a playground. So I said that's what drew me, the problem set itself and the importance of it, knowing that if I can potentially have an impact that could be profound. But the other component is just the diversity of topics, and, brought me over there. That's how it started. When I started, I will say, it was not a topic in my career. When I started it wasn't a topic that is so pervasive today as it is today, rather. And I was hoping it would be like this, but I didn't see that coming. Boy, oh boy, is it comfortable now to be working with so many people, great people on this topic.
I hear you on that one. Like personally, I remember writing down where I kind of thought the conversation would be in maybe 10 or 15 years. And I realized last year that it had only taken 7 for us to get to where I thought it would take us 15 to get.
Right.
And I was like, wow, I never would have thought that when I was writing these words down. It's been quite an accelerated journey, as it were, to bringing this to the top of people's consciousness and minds.
Yeah, exactly. This is why I said earlier. I mean, two things. Looking forward to talking to you today. So we're both sort of bringing some of this information, forward together. But the second piece of the fact that there's several of us who years ago we wouldn't have predicted this, right, Melissa? I mean, what we're seeing right now is somewhere between groundbreaking to heartwarming. Maybe some combination thereof. And it's just an amazing thing. I will say, like, for those, it's a little bit off topic, but I got to say this. When you're picking what you want to work on, you pick something you're excited about. Like you and I both did this. We picked a topic that we were very excited about, that we hope would be a big deal. And you never know. And I think the one thing you can control is picking something you're really excited about, which has worked out for both you and me.
Absolutely. And I know we have a number of students in the audience, not just from Columbia, but from other universities around the world, and who are making those choices right now. So appreciate you adding that to the conversation. So yesterday we had Fatih Birol from the International Energy Agency come in to talk through their new net zero report, talking through the different levels of investment and technologies that we need to get us to this net zero world and to do it in a way that limits global temperature rise. And so he talked us through a pathway and talked us through a whole set of things that we need. And if I had to just boil it down into one plain sentence, we need a lot of investment. We need it now, and we need it all over the place. And so in that analysis, I mean, we need the innovation, we need the clean technologies. We also need business strategies to make sure that those technologies, once we've, discovered them, don't just sit on benches. So I've got a bunch of questions for you here, but I'll start with maybe two to kick us off. I mean, this could take the entire time, I think, just going through this. But first, I'm curious how you view the relative roles of public investment and private investment when it comes to supporting innovation and getting things deployed. And then second, if you could talk a little bit about how groups like y'all at Material Impact, but also at Breakthrough, what are your roles within that entire ecosystem at supporting clean energy innovation?
Yeah. So probably not surprising to everyone, anyone here, public and private, critical, both, and need to work very synergistic. If you take a look at the on the public side, there's both the the ability to invest in things that directly impact the companies, but then there's also all the infrastructure and things that are behind the scenes that impact policy that require money to invest in. I think without the public investment, at the very least, it slows down what we need to do. In the worst case scenario, it makes it impossible, right? So if the investment's not there. On the private side, I couldn't agree more about, I mean, the need for the private investor. Isn't it amazing right now? I want you to think about this. Every category right now in investment is participating in the overall climate initiative. Everything. You're talking like everything from seed funds to angel investors to, of course, venture capital firms like what Material Impact is and where Breakthrough Energy Ventures is. But keep going. You go, hedge funds, the Fidelities of the world, the T. Rowe Prices of the world, the Barclays of the world, the Goldman Sachs of the world. But we can keep going. All of a sudden now we have this vehicle, that's called SPACs that allow, some of the companies to go public and allow, our friends next door who may not be very heavily involved directly in the industry to own a share of a company that they otherwise wouldn't be able to own, similar to, people feeling proud of maybe once upon a time owning a share in GE when toasters and things in the house were really important, and appliances or Disney, if that, suits, or maybe more modern would be Google or and so forth, whatever people feel great about. But isn't it amazing you can own something that, so the private side is just amazing too, not just for the money, but for the participation. So I think that's, a really big deal, and the public matches really well with it, so to speak.
So I'm curious what you think. There is some pushback of folks saying, well, energy is different. Venture capital is not a good model or a good fit for these tough tech investments that we're talking about needing if we're going to reach net zero, if we're going to be really dramatically reducing emissions. I'm assuming you disagree, and I know we've talked about it. I wonder if you could discuss, like, where do you see VC fitting in this overall ecosystem? Yeah. And then also, what does it really take to invest in a tangible technology and in technology that's going to get out into the world and really make an impact and reduce emissions?
Yeah. I get that question often, like, is the venture capital model the right model for these things? And they're very intelligent points and questions, but they're missing history and of venture capital. I'm a little bit of a historian of venture capital, and so let me describe it a little bit. Once upon a time, large companies used to have centers of excellence around technology and research, and some of them used to contribute 10 to 20% of their revenue to central research facilities, coming up with amazing things. And interesting enough, it was during that time that venture capital was created. So you have to think about this. You would say, well, why would venture capital be needed if some of the largest, biggest, smartest, because they were very smart, companies that knew a lot about the subject matter, had a lot of capital and were contributing towards it? Because even so, there's still those things that are so far out there that are groundbreaking and could be like huge impact things that you need an entrepreneurial approach outside of a large company to do. So venture capital as an industry was really created to go after the tougher things. If you look at just pick the United States a bit, and you look historically about what steel, or even go a little further back, automotive, and those like true industrial like type things, that industries that were created, they they were built on people who were like venture capital minded. And so when we look today, I think we've gotten a little bit confused because we think about the iPhone, and we think about apps that go on the phone. We think about the internet, and we think about ways of booking hotels, and we think about chat sites, and we think that's what venture capital does, just like softer tech. Well, yeah, that's what we see. But venture capital also, creates a vaccine, for stuff, tough science stuff. So venture capital is actually tailor-made for what's going on right now with climate. And that's why we have almost like honestly, from my perspective, almost a revolution going on from a venture capital perspective, that climate has become arguably the most exciting thing to invest in the last year in venture capital. If we look at the amount of dollars and the number of that have gone in, and the number of firms who directly or indirectly are invested in climate, I don't think there's a topic that's being more invested in than venture capital today. It's pretty amazing. And by the way, I will go on record for saying that won't change in the next 2 or 3 years. You'll see the momentum continuing because real great companies are getting created with phenomenal entrepreneurs leaving some of the other industry areas, by the way, to come over and find a way to work and do their part in climate because they think it's amazing business that can have a tremendous impact that they're proud of. So that'll drive a lot of the venture capital, based stuff. And to be fair, so you may say, like, Carmichael, why is it then people bring up venture capital? Is it a fit? Because I think people often think venture capital needs to get its money out very quickly, or or doesn't write checks that are but so large, and so maybe these things are a little more capital intensive. And the reality is, there's venture capital firms have different strategies, and some can go a little bit longer, some can go a little bit shorter, some have humongous funds, some have smaller funds. I think there's room for everybody to participate.
And so around this space of room for everyone to participate, we're getting a bunch of questions in the Q&A relating to, okay, so if we have this activity happening and all this momentum happening, what do we need to do to make sure that it's more than 2 or 3 years of momentum? And actually, not that it's just today's level of momentum, but that it's the level we need to reach net zero, which is an exponential increase. I mean, we got to go faster, harder, sooner. So what is it in terms of barriers that are getting in our way of accelerating, funding, flooding into these technologies that we need to have on the table if we're going to achieve our goals? And what kind of role do you see for policy in sending those signals? That's one set of questions coming from the audience, and thanks for those who are weighing in.
Yeah, so what I'd like everybody to think about a little bit is think about this like cooking a stew, so to speak. I'm thinking for a second here, since it's lunchtime here in my household right now. So I'm thinking about cooking a stew, and you think about what are all the ingredients that would go into your stew. Everybody can have their own decision on what are the 8 key things. It's terrible when you open up your cabinet and you're missing, a couple of the key ingredients. You know what I see right now, Melissa? I see all the ingredients there right now for the stew to combat climate. All of it. I see the entrepreneurs are there. I see the money there. I see the public sector behind it. I see the momentum from across all ages there. I see the large companies, even those who people say, well, you know what? They're the contributors to the climate thing. What are they doing? Well, you know what? And I met with a couple of folks yesterday who flew into Boston, who people would be surprised just how to come visit me, from arguably like one of the companies who has been a big contributor, and they're serious about making a difference. And I could see it in their eyes. And so, the ingredients are all there, but that doesn't make a chef and that doesn't make a stew. So so think now, what we need now is we need to have some success. We need to have some progress where, as we begin to, combine those ingredients and begin to create those companies, they're not all of a sudden going to pop up and change the direction of climate all by themselves. But as you start to see the success and that real products are getting rolled out, they're starting to get adopted on a global basis. You begin to realize, wow, we can do this, and I think we're right at that moment right now. I mean, we've got, I've I've had the pleasure now of being involved with, I'd say over the last 3 years, over 100 companies that are in this space, so to speak, over 100 companies. And I can see the momentum that's getting created around them. So what's missing? I would say, what else could be done? More collaboration. So you talk about speeding things up. The ability to decrease the amount of time it takes for large and small companies to understand how to work together. Decrease the amount of time it takes for regulations to pair up with small companies so that certain things can get deployed a bit faster. And I think the intention to do that is there. So it's just the seamlessness and the collaboration is not quite there because we're trying to find our way in that regard. And so I think the more we learn how to work better in a community fashion and collaborate, the faster we're going to be at seeing some of these companies move forward and cementing some success stories.
Yeah. So this conversation in terms of collaboration brings us into a series of things that we're also getting questions on, which is about the global nature of this challenge and the global nature of these companies. One of the sets of questions we're getting revolves around sharing clean energy IPs with different countries. And a couple of the comments have been made around, well, if we don't have countries like China involved, we won't solve the problem we're trying to solve. If we don't have countries like India involved, we won't be able to solve the problem we're trying to solve. So I'm curious about your views around raising capital from Chinese investors, sharing clean energy IP, just this whole global nature of business as we design these technologies. I think very often our conversations focus on the US, Western Europe, kind of a smaller set of countries, but looking to the future, what about the rest of the world?
Yeah. So first of all, let me go and say, well, those questions and those comments are spot on. Like, you can't turn around and say to yourself, you're going to solve a climate issue and leave out an entire continent, or, especially with that number of people. And you just, you name two major regions, I would even go as far as think of the continent of Africa as well. And so no question, this gets back to the collaboration and the cooperation component. We look beyond. First of all, I would say, you got to separate, to state the obvious to everyone. India is not China, and China is not Africa, and Africa is not the US and South America. So you got to customize what's going on in particular regions and try to figure out as best you can how to collaborate within that region. It's not, and a lot of it's culture oriented, not just politics. People think it's all politics, but some of it's culture oriented. The one thing that I know that's true, I know this firsthand, is that the human beings that all live in each one of those regions, they all agree that given the choice, what they want to do is have goods and services and a quality of life that also fits the best health of the planet. And that's the hopeful side of stuff. So, it takes longer, I would say, from our own perspective to date. We've had pretty good progress, although it's still early, in things that we're looking to do in India. Still early. Making some progress in China, not as easy because, like you said, some things are beyond me for sure. It's not venture capital. Some things are in politics and policy. But no question, the approach at both Material Impact and Breakthrough Energy Ventures is we need to pay attention to these regions and find a way to do more collaboration there. And to your point, very specifically, Melissa, to make sure I answer that part of the question, when you think about things like how do you deal with technology and intellectual property, we've barely scratched the surface in solving those problems that we've got, and the discrepancy of how different regions handle these things. But we're steadfast working on it. And, I'm at least hopeful that, we'll be able to solve some of that.
Yeah, agreed. You made a comment just about breakthrough there that I want to kind of go down the rabbit hole just a little bit on. We'll see where we go. And it's about bringing clean technologies to scale. And I know we talked earlier about kind of the role of VC and the role of different types of investment in bringing these technologies that maybe have long runways before they start deploying, and then they've got long lifespans after they've been out. So we've got a bunch of different questions that relate to this, but if I had to sum it up, my question is like, in your role at Breakthrough, I can remember when Bill Gates founded Breakthrough, I think the phrase he used was, "We need patient capital." Is that right? Am I remembering it right? Um, and I'm curious about how you overcome, these kind of tensions between timing and expectations from investors, investment returns, et cetera. You touched on it earlier, but could we go a little bit deeper on that? I mean, I'm sure everybody wants to make their money tomorrow. Yesterday would be better, that kind of a thing. But how do we get kind of this tension resolved a bit so that we are investing in things we need to get to the long-term solutions?
Yeah, this has been one of the most important things that I've had to make sure we do at both Material Impact and in Breakthrough Energy Ventures, and that's educate as best we can, starting with definitions and meanings behind statements and so forth. So let me give you a couple of things. One of them you mentioned was patient capital. Another thing you mentioned was returns. Another thing I often get is, the contrast between philanthropy versus mission when you're doing these things. So let me kind of pull it all together and describe a little bit how I look at things and how we look at things across these organizations. So philanthropy and mission are two different things, right? Both very important, right? So, mission can be very purposeful in terms of what you're trying to accomplish. Philanthropy is a mechanism for doing it. And so separate, when you're talking about venture capital, take philanthropy out for a second. The fundamental belief, and I believe in certainly around climate with venture capital is, in order to get to scale, in order to get to all those countries, especially some of the ones you already named, you need a strong economic case where you're not just saying, buy this product because it does good. You're saying, buy this product because it does good and because it is the best product that you could ever get. There's the performance economic, and it's priced at something that, is affordable, whatever it is can be, right? All makes sense, right? So then you begin to get into the idea that in order to have the impact, achieve the mission, you actually have to make money. Here comes the money part, right? You've got to kind of turn around and say, we've got to build real businesses because that's how we get to scale. That's the commonality that'll cut across all the different geographies, is providing a high quality of living with great products that make a big difference to our planet. But make no bones about it. Also, give good returns to investors. I think that's the overall, back to the food analogy, that's the overall recipe, that you want. Now let's talk about patience a little bit. You're right. I've heard, a lot of times, I'm sure Bill said it, Bill Gates said it, and lots of people said it. I may have at some point in time even said, in the course of a dialogue, use the word patience. I tend not to use that anymore because it confuses people. What was meant by it unambiguously is, sometimes people think, we were talking about earlier, whether the venture capital model matches or not. So what's meant by it is, well, do you put money in and then all of a sudden put a lot of pressure on your entrepreneurs just to sell the company or to do something premature instead of building a big company? There's definitely history of that in certain areas of venture capital. But this area that we're in, we're trying to build very big companies that can, have an impact on globally in terms of the carbon footprint. That takes some time. Now, patience, forget about that word. I mean, I can speak firsthand. Like, I don't have any patience per se. When you think about it, like, so what does that really mean? Building a big company over a period of time, it will take, just like that stew it will take in terms of when you cook it. But along the way, you can have tremendous success in the short term, right? So we're out of time as it relates to climate. So I think the word patience, listen the wrong way, can be misconstrued. The reality is, what we want to do is either start or invest in or help build an amazing big company. And then what you want to do is show progress as fast as possible. So the entrepreneurs who run these companies, they're not patient. They're hungry, they're purposeful, they're excited, they're chomping at the bit to get to a point in time. If I ever looked at them and said, be patient, they kind of look at me and go, Carmichael, what are you talking about right now? Right? So they're not patient. They're, but it's just like, someone taking 4 years of college, right? When you were taking that particular class, you're working really hard and you're trying to, in that class, learn as much as you can and perhaps get the best grade that you can at that moment. Even though it's a bit of a journey to kind of get your degree in the end. So think when someone describes patient capital, that doesn't mean patient company. Patient capital, I think, means more so we're in it to build a great big old company that makes a huge difference, takes like a half a gigaton to a gigaton of carbon out per year when it's at scale, makes a big dent. And so we're riding with you through that whole journey. And that's what they mean by patient capital. But along the way, we're right with you, entrepreneur. If my CEO, if she tells me, like, I'm looking at every 2 or 3 months my progress, I'm like, I hear you. So think about it that way.
I know we've so first of all, I'm with you. I am not patient. I try for it. But I think you're right. Like patience and drive and passion, like they're too often like put together perhaps. And it's like, no, I'm working my butt off.
Right.
I realize that even if I work my hardest, it's still going to take time, fine, but I'm working as hard as I can every single day. And that's what it takes to get it done. Like that is what it takes. So you can chip away at it, but you work hard as fast as you can. So sorry, I was laughing, but I was on mute. I realized as I did that. But this is the thing. So you and I have talked about like what it takes to build a successful company, which you understand so much more than I do because you've done it. I mean, you've built these things. So what I'm wondering with all these ingredients, and man, it really is lunchtime because I'm getting hungry here, but with all these ingredients, like, do we have all the ingredients we need, not just to build individual companies, but to create, do we have the ecosystem we need? Do we have, I don't know, is the pot the right one that we're cooking the stew in? I mean, is that fundamentally built right? And if not, what are the missing pieces of that we need to build in order to have these long lasting, successful companies? And it's interesting. You commented on what it takes to build a big company. It's when I speak to business leaders, that's like the definition of sustainability for them. They're saying sustainability is knowing that I can keep making money, keep growing, keep paying my people. Like it's not charity. That's got a different role.
Right.
This is, if I'm going to be sustainable, that's their definition of sustainability.
Well said, Melissa. Well said. Like, that's exactly right. I think people miss that. Sustainability. People think, a little more like, sustainable environment. That's very important. But in business, sustainability is like the resilience to have a business model that you're there for the long haul and you're not, going to disappear. Because you think about it, wouldn't it be heartbreaking that you build some company that makes a huge difference and it's not sustainable, right? Then it goes away. We need it to be there permanently. But you came back to the building a company. Around companies now, do we have the pieces needed? I will say again, I'm seeing that we do. It's really, if you asked me 4 years ago, I would have told you no. I would have said the ecosystem, back to what you were describing. The ecosystem still needs to be built. It's not done, but I would say the foundation of it is there. I can see it as clear as can be. I can see like I said, I could see large companies behaving in ways that I haven't seen them before in their collaboration, and that's a major part. And I could see the business models of the entrepreneurs that the entrepreneurs are bringing around these companies are highly collaborative, and they're navigating well. If I would say what's missing still, there's some topics. It's less about in a particular area whether there's great momentum. There may be some other areas that there's less momentum that are really important. And we need some more breakthroughs. We need some more groundbreaking things to happen. And if you said, well, give me an example of one, I still think we're really early on carbon capture. There's so much that could be done. But I would say I don't think there's an area that's being paid more attention to try to crack the code than carbon capture. So I'm hopeful that we're going to see some spectacular things in front of us in that area. As just one example. And so when I think about, well, why don't we have more companies or promising things going on in carbon capture, I would say it needs a little more innovation. And it really hasn't been until the last 3 or 4 years, that I've seen this amount of attention paid to it. And so when you see that, human beings are pretty amazing, right? We're very resourceful and brilliant when we want to be. And I believe that we're going to come up with some things that will be transformative. But otherwise, I think that the ecosystem, as you mentioned, I think is there. It's there. The foundation is in the culture. It's both the ecosystem, but also the culture that's embedded in the ecosystem that I'm particularly proud and hopeful for. And that mindset, if you will, is around the importance and the working together is there.
That's great. I really like the use of the word hopeful in this because very often, it's like, oh, emissions aren't where we want them to be. If you're looking at mitigating and adapting to the impacts of climate change, we're not there. That's where we are. But seeing that the ingredients are there, that's a much better place than where we were 5 years, 10 years, 15 years ago. So I appreciate the use of that word for sure. So I've been blending some of the questions from the audience, and thank you to everyone who is answering questions in there. But in the last minutes here, I wanted to explicitly ask a couple that are coming through to get your reactions on. And the first is from Alan Krumpnick at RFF, Resources for the Future. And Alan's asking, is there a specific lane for venture capital that's separate from the lane for public funding? Or is it blended together, as you were talking about earlier, and they have roles, but they're actually touching maybe in a lot of places? So distinct lanes or blended?
I think there's a bit of both, but I think the more interesting thing is the distinct lanes. So let me come to that in a second. But let me give you an example of a bit of both. Let me just stick with the U.S. for a second here. The Department of Energy, I'd say in the last 15 years or so, one of the most innovative programs that I've seen, not just in energy, but period, come out of the public sector is ARPA-E, right? Where this is, we hear, for those who don't know about it, you hear about DARPA, that we've seen on for years on television shows about this, coming up with amazing technologies through that in that case is more the Department of Defense and the military. But that's a similar kind of like amazing cutting edge program on energy was created years ago called ARPA-E. And that gives grants to early stage companies and alongside often venture capital. And there's the blended model. And both things are really important because then you have the government support and connections that are there blended with, a private source of capital. And together you can help get a really risky but potentially groundbreaking technology off the ground that otherwise wouldn't get off the ground. There's the blended. But where does the distinct lanes come from? The reality is the government is not in the business of building companies, right? And so I think what the government could be extremely phenomenal at, in terms of two things are, we have some amazing, through the national labs and the government agencies themselves, we often forget that we have some amazing scientists and technical capabilities and resources there. So I do believe the government has a phenomenal way of picking, encouraging areas around groundbreaking technologies. But the next step, which is actually building companies, see, that's the job of the private sector. And there's where the lanes come in. And I think that, venture capital has a responsibility for company building. And often people ask me about, who are you? You're in venture capital, that's a financial area. You're a finance guy, Carmichael. No, I'm not. Not really if you squint and look really carefully. I'm a technologist entrepreneur who backed into venture capital. And what I really know how to do is not trade stocks, but I know how to build companies. And I think that's the lane I think venture capital is unique in. The very best venture capital firms and very best venture capital professionals, they have an ability to do more than just write a check. They have an ability to change the outcome of a company by partnering up with the entrepreneur and the CEOs and the management teams and the boards and help solve the most difficult problems when you hit the bump in the road. Now, there's where the government, the public sector does not fit. So think, and you say, well, so think about when the best VCs wonder whether they're going to write a check into something in recycling, write a check into something in cement or steel, or write a check in a new battery technology, or figuring out how to fly a plane on hydrogen. What they're thinking to themselves is, not only is this a cool area that can make a difference, but who do I know, what do I know that can um, have a fundamental change in the outcome of this investment in this company. So there's where the lane is quite distinct.
We've got a bunch of different questions. I'm going to get to, I think, two in our remaining couple minutes here. The first one is about enabling frameworks, and we touched on policy in the future. But the question is specifically, how important are enabling frameworks? So we talked about public money. How about public policies in order to support flourishing of innovation and the commercialization of carbon tech, including things like carbon capture? And then the second one is a question from our students. So I'll give you that one first.
Yeah, I mean, this is a simple answer. How important? Critical, critical. You know, it's this goes back to the public. You're talking about a lane that's different. I'll speak firsthand. I am not an expert in policy by any stretch of the imagination. You know, it's not. But boy, oh boy, am I counting on it. Boy, man, I'm incredibly dependent on the policies being smart as these companies and these technologies evolve. Without the correct policies being put in place, like I may have mentioned it earlier, at the very least, it slows down the development, the deployment and the development. But in some cases, it may just fundamentally eliminate the ability of a product to reach the masses. So both locally in the U.S., but even outside, when we think about more policies all around the world, in different regions, critical. So that's back to the ecosystem that needs to get built there.
And the last question before we wrap up, and thank you again for your time today, is from our students, which is, what advice do you have for the budding entrepreneur or budding finance person? And what should students be focusing on if they're going to prepare themselves for a long-term career, not just the next job in clean tech?
Love it. I love that second, particularly love the second part of that question of the long-term prep, you know, not the short-term in and out. Here's where I'm hopeful, because I am watching more. I have two teenagers in high school and a freshman in college who just finished her freshman year, and their friends and all their cousins and so forth. And then I have a bunch of people who graduated from college recently or in college, in grad school, and young professionals who are switching careers. I have talked to hundreds, if not thousands, of brilliant young folks who almost without exception all want to work on things that they're passionate about that make a difference in a way that, I mean, I certainly felt this way, but when I was young, much younger, but in a way that I've not seen. So part of my advice would be the following: stick with it and pick things. You're young, so pick things that you're so passionate about that if you're going to spend time going deep in and become expert in it. Melissa, I'm going to give a shout out to you. You're a prime example of it, right? I think both of us are. But you know, you and I were talking to the folks here. You know, don't know the stuff we said behind the scenes, but the two of us, you know, about how long we've been working on these topics, and here we sit all of a sudden. You know, you and I are flattered to be qualified to be talking to, you know, at an event like this, and other stuff that you've done and other stuff that I've done. 9-10 years ago, we didn't know this would be the case, and I would say, you know, but we went after what we went after, and you became an expert in your area of business and career, and as did I. I would say learn to be, you know, pick something, and you know, it doesn't have to be extremely narrow, you know, but pick something that you're passionate about and become expert in it, like really, because it's something that feels great about being, you know, knowing that you know your stuff in it. So because I think the listeners in this, by default, whoever's listening to us today, although they've already made the decision in their lives that they're going to work on things that are meaningful. I don't need to tell people that. So I'd say within that realm, there are a lot of things that you can work on and a lot of different ways you can work on. We're prime example. Melissa and I are prime example. She doesn't do what I do, and boy, oh boy, can I not do what she does, right? And so, but we're both, you know, important in our own way in our world, and are viewed as, you know, knowing what we're doing, and we get a chance to have a greater impact. So I would say, try to become expert, you know, over time in something you're really passionate about.
Well, thanks for that. Really appreciate it. And I could go further, but we're already 2 minutes over. So I will say thank you again, Dr. Carmichael Roberts, for joining us. Really enjoyed this. This was something I was very much looking forward to today. And I want to thank you again for your time to join us for this event today. And thank you to everyone in our audience who's tuning in and who have stayed with us even as we went over time. So thank you very much. As we mentioned, the full video recording of the event is going to be available on the Center on Global Energy Policy's website later today. And the next and final session of the summit will be coming up here in, let's see, 12 minutes. So if you want to log in for that, it's the Columbia Global Energy Summit Law and Policy for Energy and Climate Solutions, which will feature my own favorite here at the center, Cheryl LaFleur and Mary Nichols, really fantastic, along with Francis Beinecke. It'll begin again in about 12 minutes here, and you can still register. But again, Carmichael, thank you for your time. It was really a pleasure. I look forward to crossing paths again soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thanks to everybody for listening. Take care.